everyone, welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. With the South Korean delegation in Washington for trade talks, officials from both sides met at the White House to discuss cooperation in the shipbuilding industry. Regarding the U.S. Treasury Secretary's recent comments that the two sides are close to finalizing their negotiations, the Korean delegation says it's a positive sign. Cambodia is reportedly planning to deport 59 South Koreans today who are involved in job scam cases. And the Cambodian Prime Minister met with the Korean delegation and expressed deep regret over the recent torture and death of a college student who was kidnapped and forced to work in a scam center in Cambodia. U.S. President Donald Trump has said he will meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Hungary for more talks on the Ukraine war. Although the exact date is unknown, Trump said the meeting will take place within 2 weeks or so. We begin this morning in the United States, where top South Korean officials held talks with a senior White House official over shipbuilding cooperation, a key part of Seoul's $350 billion trade-related investment commitment. Our Moon Ji-young starts us off.
Amid ongoing efforts by Seoul and Washington to narrow differences over South Korea's tariff-related U.S. investment package, Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Yong-bum and Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwan met with Ross Salvat, Director of the Office of Management and Budget, on Thursday. While the OMB is not directly involved in tariff negotiations, the South Korean delegation expects that emphasizing Korea-U.S. shipbuilding cooperation will positively influence efforts to reconcile differences regarding the $350 billion investment package.
The OMB is a very crucial entity for the shipbuilding cooperation project. We are visiting the office as we want to listen to what it has to say and share each other's views on shipbuilding industrial cooperation between our country and the U.S.
Earlier, Kim said that both nations are negotiating in the most earnest and constructive atmosphere. Regarding U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's expectation of results within 10 days, the official took it as a positive sign.
When the U.S. expects a result within 10 days, that apparently represents its interim assessment of the negotiations with us, and I read it as a sign that is not bad.
Kim also emphasized the critical importance of the Korea-U.S. summit scheduled for the end of this month, held on the sidelines of the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju. Reinforcing the delegation's efforts, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul, who is in Washington for the IMF General Assembly, met with Bessent and said he fully understood that Korea finds it difficult to accept the U.S.'s demand for an upfront investment of $350 billion. He underscored the need to examine the effects of such investment schemes and expressed concerns that paying the full amount upfront would undoubtedly pose a problem for Korea's foreign exchange stability. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
And the United States has criticized China's targeting of South Korean shipbuilder Hanwha Ocean, calling it an irresponsible attempt to undermine shipbuilding cooperation between Seoul and Washington. A State Department spokesperson said on Thursday local time that China's actions only reaffirm the importance of strengthening U.S. economic cooperation with allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region. The comments come just days after Beijing imposed sanctions on 5 U.S.-linked subsidiaries of the Korean firm, a key player in the Make American Shipbuilding Great Again project, which is part of Seoul's efforts to help the United States rebuild its shipbuilding industry. So we thought the trade war between the United States and China was over, but it has reignited with Trump threatening to impose an additional 100% tariffs and China tightening export controls on rare earth minerals. For more on tensions between the world's 2 largest economies, we're joined today by Jeff Moon, president of China Moon Strategies and former assistant U.S. trade representative for China. Mr. Moon, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So, as someone who served as the Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for China Affairs during the Obama administration, How do you assess the current situation and how long do you think this tension might last?
In recent months, the US and China have been trying to build trust and establish a stable environment for resolving their trade differences. Top negotiators met in Geneva in May, and they agreed that the US would pause tariffs if China agreed to continue supplying rare earths. Well, since then, however, both sides have accused each other of taking aggressive steps that have undermined that fragile consensus. For example, Beijing believes that Washington's revised entity list policy was aggressive, while the U.S. makes the same claims about China's new rare earths licensing policy. Hostile rhetoric in recent days has even included personal attacks, suggesting that both sides are frustrated and are reluctant to compromise. Frankly, all of this reminds me of sort of a tense basketball game where both sides are fighting at the net to get the ball and score. Sometimes the competition gets too rough and referees need to remind the players to stop pushing and shoving each other so the game can go forward for the benefit of everyone. I'm optimistic that in the end, negotiators will find a way for Trump and Xi to meet in South Korea, and they will agree to a mini deal that resolves some bilateral trade issues while leaving the toughest problems like subsidies and overcapacity unaddressed.
I see. And Washington is trying to tone down tensions with Beijing, and Trump said the United States wants to help China, not hurt it. And the Treasury Secretary also suggested that the China tariff truce could be extended. So how is the United States approaching talks with China at this stage?
The U.S. is trying to push back on China's latest rare earth export controls, which the U.S. thinks really poses a serious threat to the global electronic supply chain, while signaling a willingness to move forward on the broader bilateral trade agenda. Meanwhile, the elements of a potential mini deal are clear. China wants lower U.S. tariffs, reduced export controls, and investment opportunities in the U.S. The U.S. is seeking fentanyl cooperation, rare earths, and sales opportunities. So the question is really whether and how negotiators can find a middle ground. The negotiations aren't transparent, so the current state of play in the short term isn't clear. But as I said before, I think it's more likely than not that the U.S. and China will reach some sort of limited deal at Seoul. But the problem is that there's increasing downward pressure on the bilateral relationship at this point. And the flurry of emotional announcements and statements over the past week reminds us that there's still a lot that could go wrong between now and the APEC meeting.
Right, and we're now just about 2 weeks away from the APEC meeting that you just mentioned here in South Korea, where President Donald Trump could meet with President Xi Jinping. And Trump is also scheduled to meet South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung. What do you think Trump hopes to achieve from his visit to South Korea?
Well, I would distinguish between what Trump personally hopes to achieve at APEC and the broader U.S. national interests at APEC. I think that Trump's personal priorities include a potential meeting with Xi Jinping, where he hopes to announce a mini deal that will resolve some of the issues out there. He also wants to hold bilateral trade meetings with President Lee and other world leaders to make progress on other bilateral trade agreements as well. Those goals are separate and distinct from the broader diplomatic reasons why the U.S. participates in APEC. What's unique about APEC is that it is a consensus-led regional forum that meets year-round and is designed to promote broadly shared goals. So APEC promotes friendly relations between regional leaders and is an excellent venue for sharing best practices among the private and public sector stakeholders that are there. I participated in APEC both as a U.S. official and as a businessman and valued the unique interaction between government and private sector stakeholders. That interaction is designed to increase cooperation, but not tackle the most controversial issues. So heads of state attend APEC plenary meetings to lend prestige to the regional consensus reflected in APEC's broader agenda. And then they hold other meetings on the margins to address ongoing issues that may or may not be related to APEC's multilateral activities.
Right, and tensions between Washington and Beijing are directly affecting Korean companies now. And China imposed sanctions on Hanwha Ocean for allegedly cooperating with the United States on port fees. What does this signal, and how do you think the South Korean government should respond?
Well, as you know, South Korea's leading security partner is the U.S., but its largest trading partner is China. So Seoul's near-term challenge with regard to China is that China wants to dominate the Asia region. It wants to disrupt the U.S.-South Korea partnership. It wants to punish South Korean firms to discourage cooperation with Washington. Frankly, South Korea has seen this behavior before. China reacted to South Korea's 2016 announcement of plans to host American THAAD missiles with economic coercion of various forms. Similarly, China is now signaling its general intention to lash out at countries and firms that are cooperating with the U.S. during the current trade war with China. China's taking these measures not from a position of strength, because not only is economic coercion a key element of its trade playbook, but China's economy is faltering under the weight of a real estate crisis that is pulling down a third of its economy. China has reacted to this crisis by doubling down on high-end manufacturing, which is causing massive overcapacity and a need to dump products in overseas markets like the U.S. and South Korea. So I believe South Korea has done an admirable job in navigating these challenges, both in the past and now, and I think Seoul will continue to do so. But global trade tensions are increasing, and there will be dips and turns in the road ahead that all nations will find challenging in the years ahead.
Right, we'll have to see how that plays out. All right, Mr. Moon, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cambodia is reportedly set to deport 59 South Koreans involved in job scam cases today. Meanwhile, the Cambodian Prime Minister met with the South Korean delegation and expressed deep regret over the recent death of a South Korean national in an illegal online job scam. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Cambodia is preparing to deport 59 South Korean nationals involved in job scam cases. According to a report by AFP, Cambodia's national police announced that the deportation will take place on Friday in cooperation with the Korean embassy in Phnom Penh. The individuals were either rescued from cyber scam centers or detained for related crimes. The move comes as Seoul has dispatched a joint government response team to Cambodia to tackle the surge in job scams that have led to the abduction and confinement of Korean nationals. So far, about 80 South Koreans are missing or unaccounted for, while more than 60 have been confined in the country in connection with such schemes. On Thursday, Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet met with the South Korean delegation and expressed deep regret over the recent torture and death of a South Korean national in an illegal online job scam. He pledged to intensify efforts to protect South Koreans and to arrest suspects still at large. Hun, who heads Cambodia's Commission for Combating Online Scams, promised a closer cooperation with Seoul to fight these crimes. Leading the South Korean response team is Second Vice Foreign Minister Kim Jin-ah, who voiced strong concerns over the situation and called for active measures to protect Korean citizens.
I requested active measures and cooperation to protect our citizens and eradicate these crimes in Cambodia.
She also highlighted the importance of Korea-Cambodia Joint Scam Response Task Force, which includes key agencies like the Korean National Police Agency, to work jointly with Cambodian authorities to root out these criminal networks. The coordinated efforts mark a significant step by both governments to address the widening job scam crisis affecting South Korean nationals in Cambodia. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over in Japan, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has made an offering to Yasukuni Shrine, where Class A war criminals from the Second World War are enshrined. According to Kyodo News on Friday, Ishiba made an offering called Masakaki to mark the start of the Autumn Grand Festival. Since taking office, he has been making offerings or monetary donations instead of visiting the shrine in person. The right-wing Liberal Democratic Party president, Sanae Takaichi, who is being mentioned as Ishiba's successor, is said to have decided to hold off on a visit to the shrine during the festival period, seemingly to avoid conflict with neighboring countries. On the economic front, South Korea added 312,000 jobs in September, marking the largest on-year growth in 19 months. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Friday, the number of employed people stood at 29.15 million last month. Notably, employment in service industries such as wholesale, retail, and accommodation and food services showed a distinct improvement, which the government attributes partly to livelihood recovery consumption coupons that began in July. However, employment in the manufacturing and construction sectors continued to decline, signaling persistent weakness in key industries. And shifting gears to sports, South Korean football star Kang-in has been named the Asian Football Confederation International Player of the Year. The announcement was made at the AFC Awards in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Thursday. The honor recognizes the best Asian player competing outside of Asia. He becomes the third Korean player to receive the prestigious award, following Son Heung-min of Los Angeles FC and Kim Min-jae of Bayern Munich. He played 49 matches in the 2024-2025 season and scored 7 goals. On the cultural front, we take a look at a transformation of concert halls and museums that are becoming more interactive. Special lectures are now being held where audiences can listen to music of masters of classical music accompanied by commentary from experts in the field, or sessions where the museum director explains the artwork before or after viewing the exhibition. Our Eun-jin has more.
A scene from the film Before Sunrise is projected on a large screen, along with the classical music featured in the movie's ending credits. In a concert hall typically reserved for orchestras and vocalists, a former radio producer takes the stage to explain the life and music of Baroque master Johann Sebastian Bach.
I've worked in classical radio broadcasting for over 30 years. Throughout my career, I've always thought about how to make classical music more accessible and enjoyable to more people.
On a weekday afternoon, the venue's lobby is bustling with middle-aged and older attendees who've given up their lunch breaks to attend this free lecture that they've registered for in advance. The lecture sessions that blend musical insights with references to films and famous personalities associated with classical music are fully booked.
I've been attending the lectures from the first session. I'm really interested in classical music. I've been to concerts before, but this is my first time studying and learning about it through a lecture like this.
3 lectures remain through November, focusing on the music of Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven. Museum director Yoo Hong-jun, well known for his book My Exploration of Cultural Heritage, uses his signature lecture style to break down the value and cultural spirit of early Joseon Dynasty art. These lectures are connected to ongoing exhibitions at the National Museum of Korea, including topics like white porcelain, calligraphy, paintings, and Buddhist sculptures. The layered multimedia presentations, complete with presentation slides and historical background, attracted an eager audience who managed to secure seats despite fierce competition during online reservations. The venue that seats hundreds was packed.
When I heard that director Yoo Hong-jun would be giving a lecture, I waited a long time for this date. It was really hard to get a spot through online registration. After the lecture, I'm planning to see the exhibition New Nation, New Art.
For those who haven't seen the exhibition, the lecture serves as a preview. For those who have, it becomes a review.
Viewing ancient art can be difficult if you're not an expert, but after attending a lecture, you can better understand why early Joseon art is meaningful, beautiful, and worth preserving.
As concert halls filled with classical music and museums housing cultural treasures become infused with in-depth knowledge, they are evolving into a cultural space with a new purpose, a venue for artistic learning and lectures. Eun-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed to hold a face-to-face meeting in Budapest after a 2.5-hour phone call on Thursday, described by both sides as very productive. The planned summit will be their first in-person meeting since August and signals a renewed diplomatic effort between Washington and Moscow. Trump said Secretary of State Marco Rubio will head a team of senior advisors meeting Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov next week to prepare the agenda. Putin's aides called the exchange extremely frank and trustful, while Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban hailed the planned meeting as great news for peace. The call between Trump and Putin came just before Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky arrived in Washington for talks on air defense and long-range missiles. In the U.S., former National Security Advisor John Bolton was indicted on Thursday on 18 counts for keeping top-secret records at home and sharing classified notes with family members. Prosecutors say Iranian-linked hackers breached Bolton's email in 2021, exposing sensitive information that he had shared. They allege that he had failed to tell the FBI that classified information had been compromised. The charges follow FBI searches of his Maryland home and Washington office for records retained from his time in government. Court documents say Bolton shared more than 1,000 pages of daily notes and intelligence on foreign adversaries, including missile launch plans and covert operations. Attorney General Pam Bondi said no one is above the law and that abuse of power endangering national security will be punished. Bolton's lawyer called the case baseless, arguing that many officials like Bolton have kept personal diaries and says Bolton did not unlawfully share or store classified information. In Peru, at least one person was killed and dozens of police officers injured on Wednesday night as thousands of protesters clashed with security forces outside Congress in Lima. The protesters are demanding action on corruption and rising crime. Police fired tear gas as demonstrators chanted "Everyone must go" and tried to tear down metal barriers. Officials say 32-year-old Eduardo Manrio Ures died of a gunshot wound. A police officer accused of firing the gunshot has been suspended. The government says 89 police officers and 22 civilians were injured in the protest, with 11 arrests. The protests come less than a week after former President Dina Boluarte was impeached. Her replacement, President Jose Herri, expressed regret, promising an objective investigation and blaming violence on delinquents who infiltrated a peaceful protest. Uruguay has become one of the first countries in Latin America to legalize euthanasia after senators in Montevideo on Wednesday passed the dignified death bill by 20 votes to 11. The new law allows mentally sound adults in the terminal stage of an irreversible illness to request euthanasia carried out by a healthcare professional. Supporters say the measure reflects Uruguay's long tradition of progressive laws, which includes same-sex marriage, abortion, and legalization of marijuana. Senator Patricia Kramer said public opinion demanded the change, with polls showing 62% support nationwide.
We had pleasant autumn weather in the capital area yesterday, and we're wrapping up the week with a sunny morning. But again, more clouds will be moving in before the day ends with rain. And that rain will spread nationwide overnight and continue through tomorrow, with 10 to 50 millimeters expected. But the East Coast regions will see rain stick around through a Sunday morning. Gray skies have kept the temperatures milder than usual. However, once that whole rain system moves out, we're expecting a big chill to arrive with the capital, waking up to a low of just 5 degrees Celsius on Monday. But this afternoon, temperatures will warm up nicely, reaching up to 24 degrees in both Seoul and Daegu, Gwangju topping out at 25 degrees. When that early winter-like morning arrives next Monday, we could even see the season's first snow falling in the mountain areas of Gangwon-do, with the season's first frost in inland areas. Speaking of which, which the east of Gangwon-do could see more wet weather through early next week.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.